Amazing. Okay. I think we've got a pretty good number to start here. So I can go ahead and introduce today's speaker, who is Amy, who I haven't caught up with in quite some time. So, everyone, this is Amy Ursitti. She is our sensational Sib who's going to be presenting today. She graduated from Emory and has been spending the last couple of years working as a research assistant at Mass Gen. She's starting medical school very soon, is moving in a couple of weeks at Cornell in the fall. And she is also the co founder of the Profound Autism Alliance, which hopefully she's going to be able to tell you much more about than I will. So we can let Amy get started anytime you're ready.
All right, well, if you guys are ready, you can get started. First of all, thank you so much for all being here today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come listen to me talk a little bit about my experience having a sibling with profound autism. And then, as Sam mentioned, my family founded an organization called the Profound Autism Alliance that I also want to tell you guys a little bit about. So we'll go ahead and get started. So this is me and my brother Jack here in this picture. This is from a couple weeks ago, actually. We went on a family trip to Nantucket. You can already see we're really close, so I'm excited to share a little bit about him. All right. So we'll start just by telling you a little bit about my brother. Another picture of him here on the beach where he loves to go. He's 20, so he's 3 years younger than I am. And he goes to school at Neshoba Learning Group. I saw Christina here, who was at Neshoba with him and has been with him forever. So hi, Christina. You had a great time in Italy. But he loves going to school. One of his favorite things to do, anytime he's like out of school for a while, like on a vacation or anything like that, he's always asking for school, getting back in the routine. So had to mention that. He loves eating wings and bread at Outback Steakhouse. I took him about a week ago and he ate 4 whole loaves of bread by himself. So he loves to eat. He loves going to the beach and he loves listening to music too. Hard to get him away from his music. So he's an interesting kid. He enjoys traveling too. If you ever have the chance to talk to him, if you talk about trains, airplanes, or boats, he'll be happy. And all of those things said, he does have profound autism, which, as it's defined now, he'll require 24/7 support for his entire life, unless something drastically changes, which who knows. But as of now, he needs help with things like taking a shower, brushing his teeth, just all those daily activities that at age 20, a lot of us do on our own. And he also has a severe intellectual disability. So as far as we know, he can't read or write. He doesn't really talk very much either. So that's kind of what his profile is there. All right, and then a little bit about me. Sam kind of already covered all of this, so I'll breeze through this. But I'm Jack's sister. I'm 3 years older than he is. I'm turning 24 next Friday, so that's coming up. I graduated from Emory in 2022, and I studied neuroscience and classics. Worked at MGH for a couple of years, and I'm now getting ready to go to med school. So all that said, really my experience with my brother has driven so much of what I want to do, like pursuing research and then medicine. I'm kind of thinking psychiatry right now, but open to other specialties too. Definitely inspired by my brother. So I have him to thank for that. All right. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about my relationship with Jack and kind of go through chronologically some of the ups and downs of profound autism. Those of you who have siblings, something I think we talk about a lot is how things kind of ebb and flow. There are times where things are good and stable, and then things like kind of become chaotic again. So I'll go through some of that with Jack. So yeah, Jack was born in 2003, and he was born with a ventricular septal defect. So he had like blue spells and things like that and had to stay in the hospital for a while. My parents always tell the story about how I didn't want to leave him there. How like once I came in the room, I was like, he's mine, like I got him. And I said we couldn't leave him because he was special. So that was a whole thing on its own. They had to calm me down because we did have to leave him. But little did I know how special he would be someday. As he got older, he wasn't really talking that much by the time that he was 2. He had one word, ball, that he would say, like with my mom, rolling a ball back and forth, but he had lost that. So my mom took him to his 2-year checkup. They were like, oh, like, how many 2-word phrases does she have? Does he have? None. How many 1-word phrases does he have? None. My parents didn't really know a lot about autism at the time, so really weren't expecting anything like that to be kind of out of the ordinary. It was more, they were thinking he's a boy, development might be slower, that kind of thing. But after that appointment, he ended up being referred to a neurologist and getting his autism diagnosis. So that was all when we were really young. Yeah, so that's the beginning. And then shortly after that, we moved to Boston from Dallas, Fort Worth area. We lived in Texas when he was diagnosed, but there weren't really that many resources there. Like it was something like he was only getting an hour of speech therapy a month or something like that. So my dad, his job moved him up to the Northeast, which was kind of a shot in the park for Jack. It changed everything, having a whole new team, new school to go to, doctors, everything that you could possibly need for the needs that he had up in Boston. And then also my mom started working for Autism Speaks in 2008. So that was kind of like an added part of my family life at home outside of just having a sibling with autism, was having a parent who's also working in the autism field. I feel like I grew up being very immersed in that kind of world. You can see here on the right, this is our first Autism Speaks walk ever, I think. It was in Texas and Austin. So you can see us all there. Jack's really little in the stroller. But yeah, we've been involved for a long time. Okay, yeah, so going up to Boston, he started getting bigger. This is him with one of his doctors, Dr. Bowie, his gastroenterologist, who is amazing. You can see him like really interacting with Jack. Something that I think is really cool is when doctors really talk to him and not around him, because somebody like Jack, he can't always verbally engage in the way that you might expect. So when people find ways to connect with him, that's awesome. But when we got here to Boston, so he got older, he started having some aggressions, and then he was put on medication. My parents had been kind of hesitant to put him on medication for a while, but his doctors really convinced them that it was the time. And it's so funny, I feel like so much of my sibling experience, like I don't really remember him being that aggressive. My parents always talk about like, oh, these like few years were such a bad time. But I think sometimes when you're a sibling and it's just the environment that you grow up in, it's not anything that's like out of the ordinary. So he apparently went through a phase where he like didn't like the sound of my voice and would pull my hair. But I don't remember that at all. So only good things to remember about Jack for me. So yeah, that was the next couple of years. And then he was pretty stable for a while. Again, kind of ups and downs here and there. But I feel like we as a family really adjusted and were able to like, when he was going through a tougher time, get him more support. So his behaviors would come and go, namely aggression and self-injury are the two that he's had the most challenges with over the years. There was one year, like over the Christmas break, where all of his doctors were out, and he was going through like a medication adjustment, and he did have a lot more self-injury at that time. Like I remember I got him this like giant stress ball for Christmas. And I like have a picture of him. I didn't put it here, but he like was squeezing it. He was lying on my parents' bed and he has all these scratches all over his body. Where like we would like go in his room to get him up and like he would have new scratches. So he was self-injuring a lot. But fortunately, when his doctors were all back in office, we got the medication adjusted and that stopped. Largely during this time, we were continuing to focus on getting more language for him and just managing those behaviors. He uses an iPad to communicate, so he'll like press buttons on it. And then there are things that he says too, where like, if you know him, you'll understand what he's talking about. Again, mostly airplane, suitcase, things like that, his favorite conversation topics. Something cool is he actually ran on our town high school's cross country team few years ago. I was a cross country runner in high school. So my mom and I met with the cross country coaches and asked if it was something that Jack could do, because he's technically placed out of district in our public high school. So we could have him go on the team. So you can see him here. This is after one of the meets on the home course at our high school. And the guy who he's like putting his hand on his shoulder is actually like the top runner on the team, who was a really good friend to Jack. They like went out to lunch and things like that. And he was always cheering Jack on. He actually got like a course record that year and stayed behind to cheer Jack on as he finished his race. which was really cool. It's awesome to be able to see people making connections with him out in the real world. And then going on, Jack and COVID-19, you can see him looking at the Lunchables selection here in this picture. But I remember just being amazed at how well he did. I was in college at the time, so I had to pack up all my stuff and move back home during COVID. So it was a lot of family time, all of us just being together. And Jack did amazing. We really didn't know how he would do with that break in the routine. But he started out having kind of a hard time doing Zoom. The things that he does in his classroom are very like vocational focused. So he would be doing things like folding laundry, learning how to use money, things like that, that are really hard to translate to a Zoom class. But I was so impressed with how he did, how he would sit for longer and longer each day. And by like deep into the pandemic, he was doing Zooms for almost an hour, which is amazing. Very proud of him. And he did great with wearing masks too, which we weren't sure, because he like doesn't even like wearing hats or anything like that. So we were like, we'll see how he does. But he knew that if he wanted to go in the store, he needed to wear a mask. And it's one of his favorite things to do. Christina can attest. Jack asked her to go to the store all the time. But yep, he did awesome with that. So very proud of him. And it was like a cool thing to see when I was home, just how far he's come, because a few years before that, that wouldn't have been the case at all. So silver linings there for sure. And then in all of this too, applying for guardianship, he turned 18. So in order for my parents and myself to be able to make medical decisions for him, decisions about his education, things like that, we had to apply for guardianship. So my mom and I are his guardians. And luckily it's easy for me. She like is very on top of things, so filled out all the paperwork and I just signed off on it. But yeah, that was all going on at the same time. Okay, so then since then, kind of his current crisis right now is he started tongue biting as a self-injurious behavior. And this actually started at my college graduation. We were like all out at dinner the night before I graduated. You can see the picture here on the left. This is like at the restaurant where we were. So kind of setting the scene a little bit. He was sitting between me and my mom. And he all of a sudden just bit down on his tongue really, really hard. Kind of tensed his whole body, like not just a little bit, like he was like full force into it. And blood just started to pour out of his mouth. So my mom and I were trying to get him to stop, but he was so like just clenched for like 10 seconds or so. So my mom, my brother left. They were like trying to figure out what was going on. And then that behavior stopped for a little while, but then it came back full force, where he was biting like 60 times a day. My parents brought him to the ER a few times. Wasn't really anything that they said that they could do. So that was that. We adjusted some of his medications, and that helped for a little bit. But then the past few months, it came back. It had been kind of like dormant for a while. Again, things coming and going, this came back to the point where he had to have surgery because he was biting it. He almost bit off half of it pretty much. So we had to go in and have it surgically removed. So that's him here on the right after his surgery. He did great. Something that is kind of hard to grasp about profound autism, I would say. I went in to visit him before his surgery, and obviously he was not in great shape with like half of his tongue hanging off. But he was like giggling, asking for tickles, like not really exhibiting any signs of experiencing pain that are typical. So I don't really know how he experiences that. I hope it's not super painful because it seems like it really would be. But where we are on that, he's starting ECT soon to try to address the root cause of the behavior because he got the surgery, but he's still biting after all of that. So trying to get that started. He has a cardiology appointment tomorrow, and after that's cleared, he should be able to start. So kind of fingers crossed that that works. But yeah, that's kind of the constant like what if that we live with profound autism is just not really knowing what solutions are. Again, he had been to the ER multiple times before getting the surgery, and like there were times where they would just give my parents a mouthwash and send him home. But clearly there was a lot more going on that needed to be addressed. So we're lucky, again, to live in Boston, where we have some really great hospitals. His medical team, when he was getting the surgery, was amazing. I met all of them and they were very caring to him, and wanted to make sure that he got the best care possible. So that was really a blessing there. And fingers crossed for the future too. All right, so I talked a lot about Jack, which I feel like I could go on and on. I love him, he's great. But just to touch a little bit on the sibling experience, because that's what we're all here to talk about. I feel like when I talk about being the sibling of someone with profound autism, I always start with saying like, it's all that I've ever known, which I definitely am curious to hear, like how all of you guys feel, anyone who's a sibling out there. Definitely want to discuss after. But I feel like growing up, I always just thought our family life was very normal to me. And then I would like go to a friend's house and I was like, wow, it's really quiet here. Like, what's going on? So I feel like a lot of like when people ask like, oh, does this stress you out? Anything like that? It doesn't really, because it's just so normal and how I've grown up. So it all is just my life. Yeah, you can see pictures of me and Jack then and now when he was a little baby. And then this one on the bottom is from a few weeks ago. So we've been together for a long time. I know him really well. So and I'm lucky to know him for sure. And then I feel like as a sibling too, I think my parents did a really great job. I have them to thank for this, at making sure that I always had my own activities, my own things to do. So even though I had a brother who was so profoundly affected by autism, and then also had a mom who's working in the autism field, that I had things that were separate from that. And I really feel like I could kind of get out of my home life a little bit by participating in activities. But that being said, I'm sure some people can relate to, I always was only going to have one parent at everything. So like if I had a cross country meet or a performance doing musical theater, one of my parents would be there at best, maybe nobody. So sometimes it would make me kind of sad to see like people's whole families. And I wish that Jack could be there too. He did come to one of my musicals, which was really cool. But most of the time it was one of my parents. So that was something that kind of made me sad to miss out on. But it is what it is. And I am glad that I had those activities to kind of get me through. And again, Jack has really inspired all of the choices that I made, like doing autism research in college, doing Best Buddies, going to med school. I don't know if I'd be doing any of that without him. So I'm really glad to have had this profoundly impactful experience. Can use profound in so many ways, that really excites me about my future, and just the possibility of making the lives of people like him better. In that, also going kind of on a different path, having a brother with profound autism is also something that I'll have to work into my future plans as well. So like even thinking about like a few years down the road when I'm deciding where to do residency, it would be great to be close to home to be able to support my brother if he needs anything. And then like not to get too deep into this, but thinking about like if I want to have my own kids someday, like who knows if they might have autism too. And just being in a place where there are resources available. Those are like kinds of things that you have to think about as a sibling with autism, as a sibling of someone with autism. So that is involved in my future planning too. But last thing I'll say here, is that I'm just lucky to have the coolest brother ever. I love him. I always tell people I feel like my relationship with him is the most genuine one that I have in my life, because in the age of technology, I feel like my friends, other family members, I can just send them a text whenever I want, and you like don't really think about it. You kind of take it for granted, the relationship that you have with them. But for Jack, like I can't just text him whenever I want. He like doesn't really like to do FaceTime either. He always wants you to like be squishing him or tickling him or something physical. So I really have to be there engaged in person with him if I'm going to interact with him. And I think that's so special. I think it's not the kind of relationship that a lot of people get these days. So I feel really lucky to have that. All right. And now kind of switching gears a little bit, I'm going to talk about my family's organization, the Profound Autism Alliance. Something that I think can be challenging as a sibling these days, is just seeing the conversation about autism not really include profound autism. Like a lot of people think autism and they think the good doctor or love on the spectrum, which all great. Like I'm not trying to say anything bad about that. But it's not anything that really includes people like my brother. And that like a lot of our Thanksgiving dinner conversations in my family kind of revolved around things like that. Just saying like, oh, people really aren't talking about profound autism and these people are being lost. So we ended up founding our own nonprofit organization that is meant to be focused on research and advocacy for these people specifically. So we just started that about a year and a half ago, so still very new, getting our feet off the ground, but mostly working in advocacy. So we did some advocacy around the Autism Cares Act most recently. My mom tries to go to DC as much as she can to go do in-person meetings with legislators. She'll do them over Zoom too, just to talk about why profound autism needs to be included in research. That's what this act is all about, being reauthorized. But as it is now, it doesn't specifically say anything about profound autism. So that's what we're trying to do. So we did that. We have monthly advocacy meetings to teach people how to be advocates. So you can see how to meet with your own legislator, how to follow up with them, things like that. We really wanted to make advocacy accessible to everybody, because the most important thing is just to share your story. So many people have experiences of their own, even within the profound autism community. Like my brother might not look like somebody else's brother or loved one. So it's important just for everybody to share their personal story. So that's something that we want to do there. And then on the research front, we attended INSAR in Melbourne, Australia this year. That's where this picture here is from. So that was really cool because they had a profound autism focus this year. So in the middle of this picture is Dr. Matt Siegel, who gave one of the keynotes focused on profound autism. And we had been in the past and they hadn't talked as much about profound autism. So it was really cool just to see that recognized this year because profound autism needs research. I think my brother's experience really exemplifies that he would like show up in the ER and they wouldn't know what to do. So we need more research and hopefully we're on the way there. And then we're also doing things like funding an Echo Autism Intense Behaviors course type thing for physicians to learn about how to treat these challenging behaviors in people with profound autism from the experts. I don't know if any of you have heard about Echo, but it's a really cool program where kind of expert physicians in one area will disseminate knowledge to others. And they like go through cases and talk to each other about like what they think the best thing is to do over Zoom. So like people don't have to do what my family did, moving across the country to get the services. The goal is to move the knowledge to the providers all over, so people can access care just where they are. So I think it's a really cool program that I'm excited about. And then we also just want to be a platform for researchers to share whatever projects they have going on, because if I've learned anything from working in research at MGH, recruitment can be really challenging, kind of working both ways. Studies need to be made to be inclusive of people with profound autism, like figuring out how you give instructions to somebody like that, make sure they understand that's part of it. But also having families to participate in your studies would be helpful too. So we're hoping to help both those ends. All right, and then going on, it's my last thing, I think, but we have a sibling action network as part of the Profound Autism Alliance that I have started. Something that I experienced growing up, I've done lots of sibling groups, like when I was in elementary school and things like that. And I felt like I would show up and everyone would just talk about like, oh, having a sibling with autism is so hard. And it's like, yeah, but like, I feel like that wasn't super helpful for me. To go forward, like we could talk all day about the challenges of having a sibling with autism, but going into the Profound Autism Alliance, having a sibling group, I wanted it to be something that was really active, where we're actually doing things to better the lives of other siblings and then our siblings with profound autism as well. So we're having monthly meetings now, also just getting off the ground. But something cool that we did, we had a sibling hill day back in June. So we went in, met with our legislators, and we're doing advocacy around the Autism Cares Act. And this was very sibling driven advocacy. My mom was supposed to be there with us in the meetings, kind of leading, talking about the policy points. But my brother had bitten his tongue and gotten rushed to the ER in an ambulance. So my mom had to go home all of a sudden, left us to do the meetings on our own. So I remember I went for a run. I'm a runner for anyone who doesn't know me, before our meetings that day. And I was thinking about oh, what am I going to say? Kind of de-stressing a little bit. But I was thinking about it and I was like, this is actually good that we as siblings have to go in, just do our own thing. Because it's so rare that siblings are really recognized without our parents there. So when we went into these meetings, it was all focused on being a sibling of someone with profound autism, which was really cool. So I'm glad that it worked out that way. I'm not glad my brother went to the ER, but glad that we got to go do our own advocacy. I think we were ready for it and we didn't know that we were. So that was a really cool experience. Yeah, going on a little bit, just some current projects that we're starting to work on. We're working on some guardianship guides, just about how to become a guardian for your sibling, and things to keep in mind when you are their guardian, depending on what state you're in. I know for me, I'm my brother's guardian technically, and I met with his special needs attorney to talk about the specifics of guardianship in Massachusetts for this project. And there was so much that I didn't know, which I think for me personally, my parents try not to load too much on me right now, just because they don't want to stress me out about being a guardian. But at the same time, it is really helpful just to know what to expect. So I think that was really helpful to talk to her, and we're working on putting together guides to put out to the public, so everyone has access to that information, but kind of going through state by state, and talking to special needs attorneys like that, and seeing what you need to know depending on where you are. And then we're starting a podcast too. We want to do interviews with siblings and also just experts in the field of profound autism, just to have a podcast for Profound Autism Alliance that people can listen to. So starting to work on that. Also doing a video representation of profound autism. Cassie, I think, is here and she's kind of spearheading that effort. But we just think it's important that talking earlier about media representation of autism doesn't include profound very often. So just giving people a visual of what that looks like in a respectful way. There are lots of things like self-injury, aggression that are really tough to portray, because somebody like my brother, he can't say oh, I'm okay with you posting that, so it's something that we want to respect the dignity of these people, but also show just what they experience in everyday life. So that's something we're working on. And then also helping with the social media content for Profound Autism Alliance. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of that. So yeah, that's what we're working on as siblings. Okay, and then this is my last slide, just if you're interested in getting involved in the Profound Autism Alliance, just the general organization or the Sibling Action Network, this QR code should go to our website. Hopefully it works. If not, let me know. You can also email me or the siblings at profoundautism.org email if you're interested in any of the sibling stuff.